There. Ta-da. We're nearing the end of Genesis. I think I might have even said last time that this time we'd end Genesis. I'm not so sure we're going to do that. I took a look at how much was still left. You think as soon as I hit Joseph, it's almost over, but man, there's a lot there. It's good stuff. So, who can recap just the highlights of where we left off with Joseph? Anyone remember? He was captured at the end of our time. He was sold into slavery. But we really got to track the details of this story because God wants to tell us a lot through this. And part of what we want to do is we want to watch the brothers and their behavior. Okay? So does anybody remember one brother did something apart from the others last time? Reuben. And what does Reuben do? Yeah, they were going to kill him. They were just going to kill Joseph. But Reuben prevents the other brothers from killing Joseph. And if you remember, they threw him in that pit, and Reuben decides he's going to come back when nobody's around and release him. And but while he's gone, the brothers see this caravan coming, and they end up selling Joseph. And Reuben is despondent that his plan was foiled. So tuck Reuben's name away. He did something, if not good, at least better than his brothers. I think we can give him credit for that, right? So this is where Genesis is just, it's full of interesting stories. Genesis 38. Now we come to the story of Judah and Tamar. So this is another brother, Judah. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brother and turned aside to a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. Judah was in Chezib when she bore him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up," for he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And when Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He turned to her at the roadside and said, come, let me come into you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, what will you give me that you may come into me? He answered, I will send a young goat from the flock. And she said, if you give me a pledge until you send it. He said, what pledge shall I give you? She replied, your signet and your cord and your staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. You guys tracking with the story so far? Yeah, this is a nice family story. Another one? Wow. Okay, I'm going to plow ahead. Any questions, though, before we... Yeah. When Judah sent the young goat to his friend, the Adullamite, to take back the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. And he asked the men of the place, where is the cult prostitute who was at Enaim at the roadside? And they said, no cult prostitute has been here. So he returned to the Judah and said, I have not found her. Also, the men of the place said, no cult prostitute has been here. And Judah replied, well, let her keep the things as her own, or we shall be laughed at. You see, I sent this young goat, and you did not find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality. And Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, please identify whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. Then Judah identified them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not know her again. When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took it and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. And she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. Therefore, his name was called Perez. And after his brother came out with the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Okay, we'll stop there. Who's the hero of the story? This little sub-story. What's that? The stork did his job, didn't he? This is quite a story. And not only do we got to think about the story, but why is it plunked here? We just started the Joseph story, and all of a sudden we get this, because right the next chapter we're going back to the Joseph story. Why? What was it? That's one of the questions whenever you're reading Scripture. Why is this here? Why this? Why tell us this story at this time? What do you guys think?
Does it have anything to do with the two kids? Because it kind of reminds me of Jacob and Esau.
Yeah,
And the two sons that one came out first, like he should have been the firstborn and then the other one.
right. And whose kids are they?
Judah.
Judah's, right? And he had two. Okay, well, let's look at Judah. What is Judah's problem? Okay, number one, ultimately, he didn't trust God, right? And how did he not trust God?
Because he was afraid for his third son to be dying.
Right.
So it's like, I don't want to go down that path.
Okay, so he's afraid his third son is going to die, might die, so he doesn't give him or make him take Tamar, right? But who does he punish by doing that? Tamar. Okay, so he doesn't trust God, so he doesn't follow what they're supposed to do. What else are his problems? Okay, it's right there. Lust. He went into a prostitute. He's traveling and he sees what he thinks is a temple prostitute. Yeah.
Desirous lust.
Okay, so there's lust and there's also foolishness, right? Stupidity. So he's got a multiplicity of issues going on in his life, right? But what do we also know about Judah if we look ahead? Yeah, the Messiah is going to come from his lineage. This is the lineage, Judah, the tribe of Judah is going to be the favored tribe. Isn't that obvious from this story? No, it's not. But we're not done with the whole narrative of Genesis yet. So Judah has some time here. But this dude is off to a very poor start. Okay? I'm not going to spend more time on this because we're going to talk about Judah again. But any other thoughts or questions that you guys have? Anything you notice in this narrative with Judah?
Don't you think it's a little strange that he cared so little about his identity?
Yes. Who does that remind you of? Besides you. I think of Esau.
Oh, yeah.
He's just kind of flippant. Well, take my signet ring.
And that was everything.
My staff, yes, yes.
He took that signet ring and dipped it in wax and stamped it on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It was his signature.
And he gave it to a prostitute.
And when his servant couldn't find it and get it back, he said, "Oh well, who cares?"
Yeah. So, and he thinks she's a temple prostitute. What does that mean? A temple prostitute. So it's a Canaanite temple. And the Canaanites believed, among other things, that the seasons and even the setting and rising of the sun were the gods. And particularly the fertility gods were enticed by activities done with prostitutes. So a temple prostitute, it was somebody, it was a way not of only pleasing yourself physically, but it was thought to be a type of offering to excite the gods and bring rain and fertility to the crops. Yeah, so Judah he's not a little off course. He's way off course. All right? Go ahead. You first.
Say, these are the sons of Jacob, who God renames Israel, and they're his chosen people, but the sons have gone so far. The last story about Dinah,
Yeah,
they massacred the sound. These kids are really ungodly.
yes,
One generation from Jacob, who was God's chosen.
yeah,
I mean, God named his people after Israel. His kids were terrible.
right.
Look at how he protected them and saved them.
Even in the midst of his deceit.
I think another thing that's interesting too is the culture of the time required a man to impregnate his wife so that, because he was probably going to die first and she needed help in her old age. And Judah denied that to her.
Yes,
And this is part of God's plan to take care of people, you know,
widows and orphans and sojourners.
yeah, I mean, it's part of his social program,
Mm-hmm.
like gleaning,
Mm-hmm.
part of the social program. But
Yep.
he's an angel.
Yeah. Right.
And I wonder what Judah thought about his boys, because he must have known they were skunks. I mean, why, God took them because they were not good men.
Right.
And I wonder what was going through Judah's little brain when.
Yeah. His sons are dying, and there's no children born. So up until that point, she seems to be barren, but we don't know how long she was married when her first husband died. But we know why she didn't have a child with Onan. But you're right, deceit, deceit, deceit. And now the sons are just, they're just full of it.
But the script knows what is going to come at the end of this,
Yeah.
or in the middle, wherever you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So he has written the play. And this is, no matter how messed up it is, there's going
Yeah.
to be something come together like it's supposed to.
Yeah. He uses even our rebellion to write the perfect ending. So here's Judah, tribe of Judah. Well, now the story goes back to Joseph, and Joseph has risen in ranks in Potiphar's house. And what happens? Another woman. Now, in this whole narrative, everybody's a deceiver, except Joseph is without guile. Do you remember me saying that last time? So we can look, when he has these dreams and he tells his brothers, he seems to us like a clod, you think he'd like hide that stuff or be, just be delicate with it, but he just says it because he's without guile. He's not stupid, but he does not anticipate the deceit and jealousy that's in others because it doesn't seem to be in him. So, we have Potiphar's wife. And here is, she says, lie with me. But he refused, and he said, so I'm in 39, and I'm around verse 8 here. No, verses, I can't see. Put these on. Verse 7. Lie with me, but he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And then verse 10, and as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her. So that day after day, she is persistent. How long does this go on? We don't know, but it's more than a couple of days, because that phrase, the Hebrew phrase there, day after day, signifies an ongoing and repetitive event. And so we'd see later in 1 Samuel, Hannah and Peninnah, the two wives of Elkanah. And Hannah is going to end up birthing Samuel. But Hannah was barren and Peninnah was not. So it's two wives, one's barren and one is not. And Elkanah loved Hannah, but it says Peninnah had children. She had sons. And it says Peninnah would ridicule her about it day after day. Day after day. So this is constant. But one day he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house. She caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled. I'm going to skip down. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me. His anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. All right? So what do you see repeating here in the story? And when I say in the story, I mean the whole story of Genesis. What is being repeated here? What's that? The Lord's in control, yes. But how do we know that from Genesis?
Different phrases of the Lord was with him versus he was absent from the
Yeah.
Lord or wicked.
The Lord remembered Noah. You know, he tells the story of this descent into despair. We're watching these people's lives unravel. Now, they're only on a page for us, so we don't really understand how agonizing it must all be. Like if 50 years from now, somebody wrote about our lives and they wrote about the worst part of our life, they'd give it a paragraph or two, right? And people would read it and they'd say, oh, that doesn't sound great. And then they'd just go on. But when you're living it, it's long. Joseph is going to be counter. His every movement is going to be counter to everybody else in Genesis. Because what happens to him here? He comes to, God put favor on him, right? At any point so far, has Joseph tried to manipulate what was going on to make it come out good for him? No. Everybody else does. Well, this is my wife. This is my sister. Doing the different things with sheep and deceiving. You got deceit all over the place. Name changes, putting on skins and faking your identity and all this stuff. Joseph does none of that. And he just sits there in the care and the peace of the Lord. Yeah. Chapter 40. 2 dreams. You guys know the dreams, essentially. I'm not gonna read through all of it. But the cupbearer and the baker given dreams. But let me skip down to verse 9. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in the Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days, and 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly when you were his cupbearer. Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house, for I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the pit. Let me just read keep going. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days, and 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Well, once again, we see Joseph, a man without guile. He didn't notice when the guy asked, interpret my dream, he just told him exactly what it was. He didn't try and sugarcoat to the baker what was going to happen. But as God remembers people throughout Genesis, other people forget people. So it's 2 whole years. If we look at Genesis 41, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, and behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump. And they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile after them and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, thin cows ate up the 7 attractive, plump cows. And Pharaoh awoke, and he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk, and behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So in the morning his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Then the cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Hey, wait a second. I remember my offenses today. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me at the chief baker in custody of the house of the captain of the guard, we dreamed on the same night, he and I, each having a dream with its own interpretation. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And as he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged." So 2 more years since are added on to this whole trial that Joseph is going under. The next verse, 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph and quickly brought him out of the pit. One thing that strikes me about this part of the story is this. Joseph is in this long trial, and it's clearly not the life he wanted, not by a long shot. And that's why he asks the cupbearer to remember me to Pharaoh. I'm not supposed to be here. And yet, in the midst of it, he doesn't manipulate, he doesn't deceive, he goes to work. And all he does, even in those terrible circumstances, God prospers. And there's always that opportunity in the midst of suffering to look at our blessings or our agonies. The agonies are real. At no point is God saying you should ignore your agonies because of the blessings. He's not saying that. And we see that in Joseph's story. Escape from where he's at is still something Joseph wants, and it's a right and good thing to want. But what we're picking up as we go follow Joseph along is, okay, he's in the midst of it. He wants out of it, but he's waiting on the Lord. This guy knows how to wait on the Lord, far better than I do. And so it strikes me at this part of the story that at some time there was a specific day that at some point somebody from the jail came down to get him. You're going to see Pharaoh, and they're going to change his clothes and shave him and clean him up. And there was a specific day, and sometime in that day, he was taken, and his road to freedom has begun. But when he got up that morning, he had no idea it was about to happen. When he got up that morning, it was just another day in limbo, right? In the midst of the trial. And lo and behold, without him because there's no lead up to it. There's no Joseph could see he's going to get out in 10 days or, his sentence was this long. No, he has no clue. And just one day, without warning, without somebody giving him a hint, all of a sudden he's going up, and he goes, notice what he does. He goes from a prisoner in a prison, all the way to the top guy in the office, in the country, right? In the world. This is the most powerful man in the world. It's Pharaoh.
Where's Potiphar's wife in this thing now? She just disappears.
She just disappears from the story. And yeah, I mean, it's not in the text, so I don't spend a lot of time wondering it, but I got to believe Potiphar knew something of his wife's behavior. So, skipping down, this proposal pleased Pharaoh. So he interprets the dream. You're going to have 7 great years of great harvest, and then you're going to have 7 years of famine. Take all this, put people in charge, and store all the extra grain you can get. And Pharaoh likes that plan, and he doesn't just like the interpretation of the dream, but clearly there's something in Joseph that people notice about his ability to lead. Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God?" And Pharaoh said to Joseph, so all his magicians, all his wise men could not interpret his dream. Well, we have another, what does this remind you of in the Bible later on? Daniel. Another dream sequence. So the next time you read Daniel, try and think and compare and contrast these two stories, because often God will use similar events to highlight different things in each story. There'll be some things the same, but there'll be some things different. But we're in the Joseph story for right now. So Joseph was 30 when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. And during the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly. And he gathered up all the food, those 7 years, which occurred in the land of Egypt, and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from the fields around it. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born of Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar's priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, "God has made me forget all my hardship in all my father's house." The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So if we were to put up a list of the 12 tribes of Judah, each tribe gets a piece of territory, except one. And it's Levi, because they're the priests. They don't get land, but they're to be taken care of through the sacrificial system. And so the Levites don't, so there are supposed to be 11 provinces, but if you look, there's no province of Joseph. Instead, what was to go to Joseph is split in 2, and it goes to Manasseh and Ephraim. You will see, particularly Ephraim, later on at times, like in the book of Hosea, Ephraim is used to refer to Israel as a whole. Now you know why and where it comes from. So when the famine had spread over the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph, to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. That's a good place, a good cliffhanger to end our today. I love the picture, though. Here's little Joseph, the little brother, right? And his brothers hate him. Let's kill him. Let's throw him in a pit. Let's sell him off. He's gone. He's in Egypt. He ends up in prison in a foreign land. He's a prisoner there. He's the lowest. And the plan of God, within a short period of time, he's going to go from obscurity. Everybody who knew him younger thinks he's dead. And he's going to go from that kind of obscurity to not just the second in command of Egypt, but notice how it says all the nations of the world are going to come to him, right? So when you read the prophecies, when you read the prophets about the future kingdom, the new heaven and the new earth, Isaiah 50, I think, it talks about all the nations of the land coming to Christ to pay homage. And so what's happening to Joseph, all the nations of the land, he is a precursor. He's an archetype of Christ. He's without guile. His trust is unquestionable. When we're going to read this whole story, we're not going to find sin in Joseph. Now, he's human, so he's fallen, and he needs Christ just like you and I do. But in the narrative given to us, he's made to be a contrast to everybody else around him. He's the Christ. He's the archetype of the Christ figure. And he's one of the few characters that we're going to come across who are that virtuous. And certainly no more in Genesis, but you'll get later on, you get to Joshua, is probably another one, and Daniel a third, and so forth. All right. Questions or comments? That it? You guys good? Well, next week we're going to finish Genesis. But I invite you to read ahead, at least read the part where Israel begins, he's going to bless, he's dying, and he's going to have a word for each of his sons. It's very important. But we know Reuben kind of did something good. Judah's going to. And it's interesting to see how these sons are spoken of by their dad and blessed. And not all the blessings are good. All right. Lord, thank you for the story of Joseph. Oh, to be without guile, to trust you enough to be without guile, without manipulation, without hidden agenda, without selfish motive. Lord, lead us more and more to be like him, to trust you enough that that's the safest and best place to be. Help us each to do that, even this evening as we head home and lay down for the evening. And when we rise tomorrow, may we remember tonight the story, Joseph, and our desire to be like him. Because ultimately what he wanted and what we all should strive for is to be like your son, Jesus. I pray this in Jesus' name.